individually, from within the organisation, and just generally being out sort of at, in on ground level. What's the current most common ransomware attacks that you're currently seeing in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the ransomware perspective, the big thing is just the volume that we're seeing right now. So we
Mm,
recently we're getting ready to publish our 2023 ransomware report, just kind of
mm,
giving you a summary of everything that we saw across 2023. But I think the idea there is that the volumes that we've seen from 22 to 23, um, as an industry, we all kind of agree that in 2022 there was a bit of a lull.
mm,
2022, 2021 was like some of the highest volumes of ransomware that we've historically seen. More victims, more publications of these victims to these different, threat groups, name and shame sites.
yep.
And then in 2022, whether that was, the certain aspects of the Russia Ukraine conflict, whatever else, we can only hypothesize. We agree as an industry, we saw a lull. Now, by no means does that mean it ever stopped. Like it was still
Mm,
very prevalent. There was still, a ton of victims and people being impacted by it, but it just wasn't the same volume we had historically seen.
mm,
2023 started out with a bang, and it's
mm,
just continued ever since. The volume starting in initial of 2023 through, the very end and into 2024 are not only the same rates we saw in 2021, but even more. And I think, again, we can hypothesize on why. I think it's because honestly, it's extremely lucrative for these
mm.
threat actors. They're making a ton of money. So we're just seeing them hit, certain industries. We're seeing them hit, certain types of targets. But yeah, it's extremely prevalent and really kind of using 0 days, using you publicly facing vulnerabilities, purchasing access via the dark web, a lot of different things that we're seeing.
I think it's 7.5% in terms of stock value can come down with an attack, and can
Yeah.
take a month and a half, 45, 50 days to recover the stock price. So I guess it then coming back down to the coming back round to the board buy-in, executive management buy-in, and budget around training, SOC, and all that kind of stuff. It's circled, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'll give you a quick use case on a very similar situation where the human error, backed up with a company that didn't have a centralized SOC in place. They didn't have something that was centralizing all the different feeds into one central location, processing it, and then deep diving and trying to identify any anomalies inside and then investigating it. We did an exercise, a hacking simulation. It was a Fortune 500 company. I'm not going to mention names for obvious
No.
reasons, but we bypassed the system within 24 hours and had domain admin rights on everything that they owned. Now this is the second time we perform this test for this organization within a year. And they actually employed new technologies to specifically stop what the first test showed, to the point where they had a new system injected that if anybody tried to get access to a server and created a new domain admin on a server, they get automated alerts sent to them, and both by pager, by phone, and everything else. So when the attack was actually commenced from our team, and again, this was a test, so this wasn't us actually trying to fully
Yeah,
penetrate
sure.
the organization, whatever. But the idea is, once we got in and we actually got into the main domain admin server that we actually compromised and we actually created a Cerebro admin. The system did exactly what it was supposed to do. It sent automated alerts to everybody in the chain of command, for the executive team, to the director of security, and everything else. Uh, One of the key individuals received the page from his phone on his way home at 5 o'clock at night. And he thought, well, that looks odd, but he never thought anything of it. He goes, hey, you know what? I'll get to it on Monday. And this is the kind of things that attackers know. This is why there's always a higher rate of attacks that are emanated on a Friday afternoon, because people want to go home and they don't want to deal with things, or they don't think it's as severe. They're playing on those human emotions. They're playing on those human habitual behaviors that they're going to actually, be able to execute these kind of things and get away with it.
We wanted to dig into the point you mentioned in your introduction there, China and Russia.
Yeah.
Let's tackle China first.
Let's talk about China first. So it's funny, when I am engaging in security venues, I'm always like, well, secure from what? What are you securing against, right? How are you going to build a security appliance or a platform unless you really know what you're up against? And I'm kind of surprised. I shouldn't be, but I'm kind of surprised. I go to conferences. I have a lot of discussions with people about how little they're aware of what's happening. So if your audience learns from this, if they get nothing out of this, then I think this is really a great point, this section here. So let's go from a big picture. Since at least 2019, the US intelligence community has been publicizing analysis and reports. Every year the Director of National Intelligence does a worldwide threat assessment that's unclassified. They have been talking about the China cyber threat to U.S. critical infrastructure. They specifically talked about oil and natural gas and others, some other rail sectors and others. It's very special for the government to do this because if they're saying this, then they are pulling this from, sources and methods that are very sensitive. So for them to say things like this and take the risk of putting those sources and methods at risk of possibly being discovered, it means that they think that that information is very valuable for people to know. And again, that drumbeat for the China threat has been going on since at least 2019. Just this last week, so at the end of January, the FBI director, Chris Wray, was on the U.S. Capitol and was given an unclassified briefing. And he specifically addressed this threat from China as ramping up to do extensive hacking operations in the United States, the power grid, oil pipelines, water systems, and all of this in the potential run up to a conflict with China over anything in the region. So you can imagine like a conflict over Taiwan seems to be what people think about the most. And some of the things he said were very provocative. Like I think the quote is that China's prepared to, quote, wreak havoc and cause real world harm to American citizens at a time of their choosing, which is, again, not if the FBI director is out saying something like that, I think he's really, trying to get people to take seriously that they are pervasively in our networks now and prepared to do us harm. Their goals are clear. They want to sow dissent within the American population, confuse us, sap our will to support a warfighting effort in the Pacific, and even at the logistical level, just prevent by shutting down systems like a port or power systems that are around military bases, for instance, that would prevent the U.S. military from providing logistical support to regional partners and allies in the event of a conflict. So China has very good reason to do this. They've been preparing it for a long time. And now I think if you're hearing the FBI director coming out and saying that they're prepared to wreak havoc now, I think that what we have to accept is that they are there and they have a sufficient foothold in the system to be able to have an effect at a time of their choosing, not just, prepare to do so.
How does the CISO look today to 20 years ago in industry? What's the difference now?
I think the difference now, in my opinion, I think there are still working with all the CISOs that I have over the years, I put them in three buckets, right? The one bucket of the CISO, which is typically a virtual CISO or a consulting CISO, or the CISOs that move every 1.5 to 2 years from company to company.
Yeah.
They still exist and they're needed because a lot of companies are still just waking up to the need for having a security office or having a CISO. Even today, we come across companies all the time. So they need they need someone to come in and set the foundation, the policies, the tech stack, the overall security program, charter, get things working, endpoint security, like just get the basics up and running.
Yeah.
So they still are needed and are relevant. But the bulk of the CISOs today are quite different. So the second bucket is people who've done that, but at the same time, they still need to do better at risk management, third-party risk management, working with audit, working with enterprise risk, working with their business partners, working with other business units, really getting entrenched into and building relationships with other people in the business. The challenge that they typically have is that they're still running the security office and the security program. They have a whole bunch of junior technicians and analysts that they're working with. So 80% of their job goes into still just running the security program, the SecOps, firefighting, doing all of that. And 20% of their time is going into extending themselves out to build relationships. So that's where I feel CISOs are now going from what we used to call a doctor no, like, this is what you can and cannot do in security, to now really saying, okay, I need to really enable these businesses to do what they're trying to do. And I need to figure that out and I need to build my own muscle. These are the people that we work with. So if I ask a CISO, so how do you actually make money and what's your margin like as a company? The number of CISOs that can answer that question off the bat, I would say, is less than 15% in the second bucket.
So, and tech and being in cybersecurity, I mean, so what's important about a culture in these spaces? You can hear some horror stories, which maybe we'll jump into later. But what sort of what do you look for in a tech business or a cyber business that makes and leads towards a good culture?
Yeah, well, so what I'll say is when we look at cybersecurity and we look at breaches, bad actors, that type of thing, a company's culture has a direct impact on its level of risk. So, in other words, I'll give you some examples. In a culture where there's openness and there's psychological safety, where employees feel heard, they feel like they can have hard conversations, they feel their managers care about them, listen to them, and also cultures where if you see something, say something, where it's not kind of a taboo thing, and it's not a witch hunt type of a culture, but it's like, oh wait, hold on a second, that seemed kind of weird, like what's going on there, but just a really open type of culture, we see that there is less risk, as opposed to cultures where there's secrecy, there's fear, there's shame, blame, finger pointing. Those types of more negative and toxic cultures tend to breed more of an environment for bad actors, which we know from the data that many breaches and exfiltration attempts and things like that are from internal employees. So I think culture has a direct impact on cybersecurity.
Wow. So the stat is then that bad culture equals, broadly speaking here, but bad culture equals more likelihood for breaches.
Yeah, definitely. I think that a bad culture creates an environment where there's more opportunity for this to happen. Not saying that a bad culture will equal, a data breach or exfiltration or whatever, but I think if we look at the statistics, cultures where people feel cared for, respected, like they can have really kind and honest conversations, those tend to be safer environments and ones with less cybersecurity internal, risk.
In the current state, ignoring sort of the future for the moment, do you think there's maybe a skills shortage or a skills gap to a degree?
Yeah, we're looking at a skill shortage that is, I think, if anything, I'm more afraid of our skill shortage than I am anything else. I got to be honest. We've got our legacy environments, they are difficult to maintain and they're delicate, but the people that ran them knew them so well, they could almost just like, Jedi sixth sense when something was wrong and be able to isolate what it was within seconds just by the way they knew that system. Sound, feel, vibration in the floor, even just the smell of the equipment in some cases. They could tell what was wrong with it. We don't have that kind of institutional knowledge in a lot of cases anymore because a lot of the people that did that, they were generational employees. They, third, fourth generation people. And in some cases, I've been to utilities where they're on their fourth or fifth generation of person from the same family that has gone to work at the plant. And that's just what you do. And, they pass that knowledge down and that all those little subtleties come with it. When someone new comes in, and let's say you're maybe a digital native, which is a good thing in a different sense, but in this sense, it's much more challenging for you to think in an analog way. So we're looking at a situation where the people that come in don't understand it and maybe don't want to and aren't really very well equipped to understand it because it kind of takes unlearning some of the things that they've learned. And again, those things are very useful in other contexts, but in this analog space, it becomes very challenging. So we call it the gray out, where we're losing a lot of really, really good old school knowledge as people leave the organization and they get to rightfully retire. They've worked at that plant like 40 years and it's okay. You can go. You don't have to like strap yourself to that machine until you die. But we do need to somehow capture that knowledge before they leave because those legacy machines are still going to be there for a while. So what I'm seeing is there's not people coming into the space. First of all, there's just not a lot of people that are interested in learning old school analog machines. They want to learn new school digital stuff because that's what they grew up with. So, I mean, that's not, like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing. It's expected, but it does create a very significant challenge where we've got the new workforce doesn't have any interest in working on old analog machines. It's just not there. So we have these, retirees that are retiring and coming back as a consultant for a quarter time or a half time, or they wait a year or two and they get tired of golfing or fishing. And they want to just do something with my brain and stay sharp. So they'll come back and contract for 2, 3, 4 times their original salary just to keep that machine alive and keep breathing life into the system, but there isn't somebody that can come in behind them that they can train. So it's a very significant problem. I don't have like, here's your silver bullet solution. It just doesn't exist. There's all kinds of challenges around the things I mentioned, but another one is there's a sense of responsibility that comes with these big machines. If the plant goes down, if there's an industrial accident because of my watch and what I did, I don't want to be responsible for an insurance claim or people dying possibly. So there's almost a fear of coming into that space and going backward and learning those technologies. There's just not a lot of interest, a lot of motivation. So there's a bunch of factors that are pushing against us getting qualified, skilled people to continue to manage these things.
I guess many people would look at the PGA Tour and instantly sort of feel that, you know, famous golfers, loads of tournaments, support of charities around the world. But we've spoken about this, and there's much more to it, isn't there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the crazy thing. You know, everybody thinks a tournament. Oh well, you know, you just show up, right? Well, I mean, we're rolling trucks out to get that entire course set up with all the various sensors, all the network equipment that needs to be there. You know, we're rolling out fan Wi-Fi in some areas of the course. We're bolstering all these things up. You know, we're rolling out 14 miles of fiber pretty much every week. And all of the logistics that go into that are insane. And then at the same time, we're trying to secure that because we have all this data coming in from all those sensors, all the TrackMan stuff, all of that comes back. We push that all to a broadcasting unit that's then pushing all that stuff out to TV, right? So all of that is in-house. We're, you know, yeah, we have TV partners. Yeah, we're sending stuff over there, but we're doing a lot of the production on it. And we're continuing to evolve that product. Like it's not just a stagnant thing. You know, we're building the fan experience. We've got applications. We've got things on the Vision Pro now. It's a really cool app. If anybody hasn't checked it out and you've got a Vision Pro, check it out. It's pretty neat. You can see the course. You can see the shot trails, all sorts of stuff. Great new products, which means we have software development going on. You know, we're trying to innovate and create better ways to capture the game and to basically provide that to the fan. So there's a whole bunch going on with the fan experience. So it's not just your traditional, hey, you show up at an arena and it's stagnant cameras even. It's, you know, we've got hundreds of cameras across a course as we try to drive towards getting to things like Every Shot Live, where we can let the fan go through and experience seeing their favorite golfer go through the course shot after shot after shot, being able to really kind of zoom in on that swing and be like, well, how can I improve, right? It's all there. And that's what we're continuously working towards. There's a lot.
The challenges in assessing OT risk, I know there's a lot out there, so to speak, and especially the one we're in now.
Well, these are those things that you don't want to fall into, right? And so these are the ones we head up against a lot. So they're not just for vendors, but they're for everybody. The first one is I call it Schrodinger's cyber risk box. Everyone knows that what Schrodinger's cat is. This idea that you have a cat in a box and it can be alive or dead or every potential permutation between until you open the box. Well, replace that cat with risk. And it has every potential of no risk to all the risk until you actually look, you know, open the box and take a peek inside. And so we often run into people that believe in the Schrodinger's situation in that, you know, I've not opened the box, I've not looked at the risk, but since we're still up and running, we must have no risk, and therefore we can move on. You know, risk is solved. As long as I don't open that box, everything's okay. And that situation works until it doesn't, until they actually have an issue, and then they realize how the magnitude of, you know, what they've done by not looking at the risk situation. So making sure that people understand they actually need to look at risk is important, and not looking at it isn't a get out of, you know, I won't call it jail, but, you know, getting out of the issue free card, because it's going to come up eventually, and usually when you don't want it to. So that's number one. Number two, we are a target. You know, why would anyone access to all of our insignificant devices with their insignificant connections to our insignificant data protected by our insignificant security budget? You know, we're just small. There's no reason to come after us. You know, ransomware is no big deal. Just don't click on anything. And if you do, just restore from backup. Okay. Unless they got to the backups too. No one knows who we are, and, you know, a little publicity would be a good thing. So, you know, it isn't that you have to be a target, it's that you're collateral damage on a lot of these situations. And so whether someone clicks on something, whether it was aimed at you or not, you're still compromised. Whether the system or the whatever the drive-by was, it wasn't meant for you, you were just a collateral damage in that situation, you're still compromised. And so even if you're not a target, you should act like you are. So getting people in that headspace is kind of important. And if you've ever been targeted, you operate like that from now on. You assume that you've been compromised and work like that.
But with the transport piece, sometimes you hear it maybe water wastage or even manufacturing. It's a case of why would they target us? We're okay. We've sort of got a few policies in place, but we don't need to worry too much. Why would people target us? Do you find that less so in rail, or maybe the same? I don't know.
Yeah, generally, I think there's a bit more of an understanding that actually in rail, there's a disruption in rail affects a lot more than just passengers didn't get to their destination on time, because there's freight trains that run on the same track, and those freight trains carry a wide mix of things, all the way from basically petrol through to potentially nuclear material in some cases, through to goods and post and things like that. So actually even a relatively straightforward disruption can have massive knock-on effects for the whole economy, basically. So I think that is one of those cases where there is a stronger recognition of that, but not necessarily at every level, and that's still part of the message we're trying to get across. I think if you go up at a senior enough level, they definitely understand that kind of knock-on effect is a massive problem. But if you get down a level below that, you maybe see, I'm the operator that runs this particular piece. I care about my thing. I don't necessarily care about everyone else's thing in the same way. So that's part of where this kind of challenge comes from.
What advice would you give them in a sense of what sort of training to get, where to position themselves? Should they get mentors? How do they move to get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. When I was in college, there wasn't a cybersecurity degree. There was computer science and other related fields. But now you can actually major in cybersecurity. There's lots of ways to get education through the university route. And there's also ways to get education through other organizations and groups online that are not as expensive or time consuming. So there's lots of resources on Udemy and LinkedIn. There's lots of groups that like peer groups that are forming. There's lots of people that are pivoting into cybersecurity from all sorts of different spaces. So, I like to say, find your tribe, find the group that you resonate with, that is inclusive, that supports you in your journey, and hang out with them. And, definitely find the folks that are doing what you want to be doing. And even if you don't know what that is, this is the time to ask all the questions. So, ask, hey, I think I want to be a pen tester, but I'm not really sure what that means and how I would get there. So, you can find someone who is doing the thing that you think that you want to do and learn a little bit about it. And you might find that, yes, that is exactly what you want to do, but then it might also lead into something else. And you might find another role, because what I found is that the cybersecurity field is really broad. There's application security, there's pen testing, there's incident response, there's threat intel, there's vulnerability management. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, there's cloud architecture. There's developers, there's products coming out of cybersecurity teams now that are really driving, data-driven insights. So it's a really cool field, and there's room for a lot of different roles and a lot of different skill sets.
Well, maybe it's a case of, like you say, it's publicity. We're talking about it now, so that in itself is helping, and then maybe down the line, that's when we get to, okay, cool, how do we get more talent into the space? And that's maybe where I can come in and step things up and come up with a wonderful silver bullet solution that solves it for everybody.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but we'll have to wait and see. But I guess
Well,
we're talking about it.
Yeah, well, I think for my organization in particular, this is now the second or the third company where, rightly so, we look at the talent pool, we look at where we have need for various positions, and we look at, like just who's available to help out. It's very expensive to try to acquire new talent, right? Just think about the whole process. You have to put a job description together, you have to open recs, you have to publish, you have to get candidates in. Like if you put any type of a candidate requisition out right now on LinkedIn, you're probably going to get upwards of 300, maybe as 500 on a specific role within a couple of days. It's very difficult to get through that in order to find qualified people. So that's sort of creating a collective race to the bottom, right? And then to acquire the talent is going to be expensive. And then you have a good probably 3 to 6 months of transition period where they have to learn the business. You get the drill. It's like getting talent is really expensive, but I think developing talent is the area where we all have real opportunity. And what I've been doing with the past few companies, including Sunrun, is taking a look at how do we create a pipeline internally, right? First of all, you're going to have much greater loyalty because you're giving people a career path, which I'm a big fan of, right? So we started with our service desk folks. We started with the network operations center and looking at where people are really starting to move away from traditional IT and support and services into more of a security mindset. That's great. You've got people that are actually starting to exhibit those characteristics. Cool. We set up a whole program. We have a security academy. We do specific trainings. We have a ride-along program where we let some of our IT counterparts come with us on, security incident management so that we can start to cross-pollinate what we do and actually help them help us. And so what has happened is we've moved 2 or 3 people out of, kind of like core support level roles or, entry level to mid-level IT support infrastructure networking into actual full-blown security roles. And these people are super appreciative. They love what they're doing and they're really productive. And we didn't have to spend an arm and a leg to get that talent. So that's one of the things I've also been saying within the broader community is I think we need to do a better job as security professionals of creating the pipeline, right? Don't just go look for an ex-developer or someone with a high-level technical degree. Think about what it means to take someone who's really not in a quote-unquote STEM field, right? I myself, I got my degree in English literature, okay? But here I am doing a very highly technical role and leading teams and being at the executive level, managing these types of functions. I think it's really important to give people an opportunity that show acumen and real interest and passion, and not to exclude them just because they don't have a CS degree or a Bachelor of Science in something, right?
And touching on a point you raised there around the manufacturing space, for example. So there's maybe a way of thinking of, well, why would anyone want to attack us? We're not a port, we're not an airport, we're not a military base type thing. Why would anyone want to attack a manufacturing organization? But that's not the way to think about it, right?
Yeah, that's another trend that you'll see in a lot of the reports is they're going after supply chain. They're going after, data brokers are another huge spike that's happening in the recent threat reports. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you have data, it's valuable. User data, login data, there's still PII. Even if your crown jewels, your secret sauce isn't that lucrative to somebody outside of your niche, company or what your product line is, the information on your employees is still valuable. Logins to your systems are still valuable. They're still looking for anything that they can sell, and they get that data in bulk, and then it becomes lucrative.
As much as you got all the new toolings and new technology evolving, as you've mentioned, but it still comes down to that communication piece, isn't it? So building your communication skills, your relationship building skills, keep them just as much as high up in order as everything else, because they go hand in hand, don't they?
I always joke with everybody. I came into technology through the back door. I do not have a background in technology. I probably couldn't code my way out of a paper bag. My university background is in communication and philosophy. And so it is something that I always think about in terms of how teams are communicating, how teams are connecting to each other, because oftentimes the technology problems are not complicated to solve for organizations. The problems that organizations have are often communication problems. They're often getting teams to work together, communicate across those silos, communicate across those divides, and really start to realize that you have a lot more in common with those different areas than you might think you have. And so breaking down those barriers so that teams can work effectively together to solve problems. The technology solution is often like, somebody has that. They already know the one or two ways that we're going to solve that are going to be really effective for us. But it's getting the teams together, getting the people organized, getting everybody heading in the right direction, kind of rowing in the same direction so that we can make the progress that we need to make.
What is the modern CISO? What's that role look like for you? I know you've touched on a few points there.
Yeah, the modern CISO is someone who still has a strong technical background, but they have to have a just as strong business background. So they're likely to have either an MBA or they have had experience across the rest of the business in some ways. They've maybe worked in manufacturing, they've worked in business operations or other areas, but they have to have that strong management skill set. The modern CISO is really about asking the right questions and driving these solutions across the entire business, building relationships with the CEO, relationships with the CFO and the chief legal counsel, so that they can really kind of meet the needs of the organization better. As opposed to the old CISO was just effectively running security operations within the IT organization. The new one has to say, my team is going to run those operations and maybe do the engineering and architecture of security, but I need to look at what are the challenges with HR? What are the challenges with the retail environment? Or if you're in the automotive, then your telematics environment and other spaces there. Is there a product security aspect of the role? Is there an e-commerce aspect? And do you understand all those different things and how they all work together to fit into the corporate strategy so that you can ensure you're driving your security program towards that corporate strategy rather than your own individual strategy?